Hi, I'm Dr. Bob Mertens, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the ideas behind the theory of the time-energy relationship, or in other words, the short version is called the time-energy theory. And there was one thing that I never put in the book, and I had so much difficulty trying to figure out how it worked into my theory, and that was the theory of gravity. And it has always and forever been something that I have remembered and forgotten, and remembered and forgotten, and remembered and forgotten, or learned and forgotten. And 3 times in my life I have understood what gravity is. And today it came back to me again. I thought I might record it before I forget it again. And so that, because there's sometimes I awakened in the middle of the night and wrote it down and then lost that note or something. In my previous video, I explained some of the ideas behind matter and energy. I didn't talk much about what energy was, but I did talk about matter and its nature, its relationship to space. And we came up with the understanding of, concluded that space quite simply does not exist. And I'll say that my definition, space does not exist as an acting causality. That is, space has nothing to do with the existence of the universe. It simply doesn't exist. So, as an acting causality, then what does exist? And we know that time exists. So we ask ourselves the next question, what is matter? So we talked about matter, we talked about volume and density and that sort of thing. We concluded that there's no such thing as a true density of matter, because matter cannot be confined into a volume, because volumes don't exist, because space doesn't exist. So what does exist? And so I said, well, yeah, time exists, but I think there might be another thing in the universe that exists. And we don't know what that is, but we know time is involved. And what we see as matter, when they talk about string theory, now string, they're almost invariably talking about little bands of energy that just kind of move back and forth, however they move, like little curlicues that go back. And since we're talking about energy as strings in energy, and of course energy is directly related to matter, mass, through the Einstein's equation, which is famous, equals mc squared, right? Energy equals mass times speed of light squared, right? Once again, right, at the speed of light, you think of light moving through space at c, the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, or 300,000 kilometers per second. We don't really call that the speed of light, because since there's no space, it really is the speed of time. Okay, so we have this equation, equals mc squared. We know that matter is also energy. We also know that gravitation is related directly to mass, or by extrapolation or interpolation, if you like, gravitation is also related directly to energy. And this is one of the great quandaries of the universe. They have never been able to come up with a good theory of what gravitation is. Now, they have talked about gluons as particles and that sort of thing. But when I think of energy, what would you think of as mass? If space doesn't exist, time does exist. And in my book, when I talk about time, I talk about mass. When I talk about matter, I talk about quasi-particles, or Q particles, or quasi-quarks, Q matter. That's what I talk about. If you think of time moving along a line, how could you create a bit of matter? And so what I think of as matter, or mass, or particle, would be sort of like a compression in time. Well, when I talk about strings, I talk about containing energy. We don't have energy containers. It's what we do. They're called fuel tanks, gas tanks. Containing energy is difficult. You have light that moves across the energy. This is uncontained energy that moves, but we're talking about energy that is bound up inside of a space, inside of a time. So since we don't have a space, that must be bound up inside something. So it's bound up inside time. Well, I have to say more than time because it's locked inside of, let's say, a temporal frame. Now, if we're going to bind up a bit of matter, and all matter, I really haven't discussed this, but every particle in the universe is attached through time to every other particle in the universe. I mean, if there's no such thing as space, then all of the universe is essentially made up of one particle of matter. Quite literally. There is only one particle in the universe. Whatever that particle is, we don't know. But it is interlinked to every other particle in the universe. So if I have a particle here, well, let's say I have a big stretch of time, right? This much time. And I take this and I scrunch it up. I compress time just a little bit. And I take another particle and I scrunch it up. Now I have two particles. And these two particles might have an electric field associated with them. This is one of the, what I refer to as one of the macro forces in the universe. It's a large force. This is when you get particles. Now, combined particles that have strange properties that interact, which is, for example, an atom interacting with another atom. Those what we can refer to as very massive particles made of a conglomeration of other small particles. We know that these big particles, an electron would be considered a big particle made up of at least 3 quarks, and quarks, who knows what they're made up of. So we have found very tiny little particles that make up bigger particles. And we keep looking for smaller and smaller and smaller things. But let's say if I have stretched time out this way, and I have a particle over here, and I've scrunched up time over here. Now I've stretched the time between these two particles. And what I get is that these two particles, however they're bound up, they're quantized, whatever they have some quantum form that keeps these locked up, this little ball. Here's one little ball, another little ball, but there's also a little stretchy line between them that doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the universe. So, and since all these are attached together, we'll think of this as a little rubber band. Now what is that little rubber band? We have stretched time over here, we've compressed it in these two places, and the things that pulling these two particles together, we're going to call it gravity. Okay, so this is the theory that I have captured time and time again. 3 times in my life I've remembered and forgotten this. And today it just came back to me once again. And this is the revelation. And I'm sharing it with you now. It came to me as I was thinking about my whole old theory. And so I'm sharing it with you now. This is a revelation that came to me, and I remembered it today. And this time I have it recorded. Let's hope this recording doesn't get erased. I'm going to upload it as soon as I can. Okay, so the stretchy little stuff between matter, bits of matter, is time. This is time compressed. This is time compressed over here. And this between here and here is gravitation, is time stretched. So that is my little theory about gravity. I'm Dr. Bob Mertens. Have a great day. Like my music? I love ukuleles. They're so cool. Thanks for watching my program.